Eva Hinds kolléganőm a szíriai UNICEF kommunikációs vezetője, és Aleppóban tartózkodik éppen a földrengés által érintett régióban. Hi, Eva. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. What is the situation on the ground like at the moment?
The situation is still very dire on the ground. There are thousands of children and their families who are still staying in collective shelters. They had to leave their homes 10 days ago when the earthquakes hit, and their houses have been and their homes have been badly destroyed, and they've been unable to go home. So this means that many are staying in mosques, schools, sports centers, other places that have been turned into shelters. I'm in Aleppo, and here alone there are more than 100 places like this. And I visited one of these shelters yesterday and seen how schools that were previously filled with students and teachers are now filled with families staying on cold floors with thin mattresses, very little from their homes. So it is looking, there's a lot of desperation. There are a lot of people who are sad, a lot of people who are still trying to come into terms with what happened. It has been very traumatic, both for the children and their families. They had to leave their homes in the middle of the night. It was raining, it was cold. It's winter here, so not here in Aleppo city, but in many places there's snow. So it's really, every day is very hard for these people in these collective shelters, as these are not places where people usually stay. So you don't have the basic services. So these places are not connected to the water or the sanitation network. There's not regularly food available. There are no blankets, things like this. So these children
the freezing conditions are a problem in themselves for these families, right?
Definitely, the cold is a terrible thing. Just walking outside, one notices that it's cold, let alone sleeping in the cold and in these concrete walls with these thin mattresses and barely no blankets. So, and no heating systems, of course. So it is hard.
Were there many children injured?
We fear that there's been thousands of children that have been injured, millions who need help. So the needs are really immense in many ways, needing these very basic services in the beginning. That's clean and safe water, that's good sanitation. It is the shelter, feeling safe. There were a number of children who were separated from their loved ones. So we are doing our best then to reunite them with their parents, caretakers, someone who takes care of them. So these are some of the immediate needs of these children.
At a time like this, a lot of medical help is surely needed, but the infrastructure, the medical infrastructure itself is also ruined. How are professionals coping, and what can UNICEF do to help?
I think this is a very difficult situation for the medical professionals, for the doctors, for the nurses, for the midwives, because before this, large parts of the hospitals, the health centers were destroyed by nearly 12 years of conflict. So it was very difficult, as well as then knowing that there are approximately 20,000 physicians left in the country. So it's a small number of people trying to do a lot with very limited resources. So that was the situation before the earthquake. And of course, the earthquake has further damaged some of these hospitals and health centers. So that's made things harder. UNICEF is bringing in medical supplies. As an example, we got a plane arriving in Damascus on Tuesday morning, bringing, for example, midwifery kits and other critical medical supplies. They were on a truck to Aleppo. This is one of the affected areas, and they arrived here on Wednesday. And we were yesterday in the teaching hospital, and it was wonderful to see that we were able to hand it over to the personnel there, and I'm hoping they're now already in good use with the midwives at the hospital. We saw some of the beautiful newborns, and we heard from the doctors that, as an example on how the earthquake has affected people, that the uptake went up by 10%. Within the first 48 hours after the earthquake. So the earthquake impacts people in so many different ways. And of course, these newborn babies need, besides love and care, they need supplies and these midwifery kits in order to bring more into this world. So they're very important. And that's an example of what UNICEF is doing.
You mentioned the 12 years of conflict that have already preceded the earthquake. And I guess this means that there's not just damage already in the infrastructure, it means that these children have already been traumatized. So what they suffered during the earthquake was just trauma upon trauma. How can they deal with that?
Definitely, it's been very difficult in many ways. Nearly 12 years of conflict has meant that many of these children have been forced to move a number of times. They've had to leave their houses and homes several times. Many have missed school because of this, because they haven't been able to keep up with it. The economic crisis is deepening. That's meant really difficult choices for their parents. Many are grappling with and trying to cope with very little money and make really terrible choices. Some have to choose, can I buy my children school supplies? Should I buy them food? Should I buy them medicine? So all of this prior to the earthquake was very difficult. And then in addition to that, the recent cholera outbreak, the impact of COVID-19. So there's been layer upon layer of things that have made children's lives so difficult. And now the earthquake, it's yet one more. And I think it underlines why we are here and why we were here before the earthquake and why we will be here long after, because these children will be needing support, not only now and in the coming months, but for a much longer time period.
How do you see the coming months? What are the most immediate needs?
I think besides the things that we are doing on the ground at the moment, it is also then making sure that when we can, we are now assessing the school buildings that have been destroyed, that in what type of shape those are. Can some of them at some point be reopened so that children can return to learning? I think that's very important in order to give some sense of normalcy. We are providing temporary learning spaces. That's another way to learn, as providing psychosocial support. And this is support to help them cope with the trauma. So these are some of the examples what we'll be doing during the coming months.
How has UNICEF been able to help so far before the earthquake?
Well, we are running our big programs here, so in many areas. One is education. We are providing different program support there. In the country, there are nearly 2.4 million children out of school, and in addition, 1.6 million children that are at the risk of dropping out. So we are providing temporary learning solutions, as well as then a so-called Curriculum B. This is a program that helps children catch up instead of going to school for 2 years, they do that in 1, and then in the hopes of catching up with their peers. So education is a big priority, work on nutrition, health, water, sanitation, and hygiene. These are some of the bigger program areas that we were working on before the conflict. And of course, not before the conflict, but before the earthquake. And of course, the work continues. And I think we're also building on the expertise, the partnerships, and the knowledge of the context. That's very important and has helped us in a very difficult situation during the past 10 days.
What do the children of Syria and the children affected by the earthquake need from UNICEF? And also, what does UNICEF and these children need from the rest of the world?
I feel the biggest thing now is because the needs are immense. We are here on the ground. We are doing our best to support them as much as we can with the existing resources, but thinking about how much support they will need for a longer term period. So it is very important that the support keeps coming, not only now in the immediate future, but also in the long term. So I think that's what the children need, not only from UNICEF, but from the world as a whole.
Thank you for your time today, and most importantly, for the wonderful work that you're doing on the ground.
Thank you.